I can't explain what I saw on the trail one summer evening. This experience happened to me when I was 14 years old. I hadn't spoken to anyone about this event since it happened, not even my significant other. I'm 20 years old now, about to double major, with my first 2 degrees in psychology and anthropology. Recently, 2 reasons unknown to me, the memories of this strange happening have resurfaced and are continuing to plague my waking thoughts as well as my unconscious and subconscious. As we are taught in psychology, talking about the situation could help with repressed trauma, so here it goes. I live in the high desert mountains of Southern California, situated just below the Sierra Nevadas and 30 minutes west of Mojave. My town is no booming metropolis. At the time, our largest market was Kmart, one of the last still in business, I might add, and we only had 4 stoplights in town. This takes place in a subsection of the town about 13 miles from the shops, banks, and restaurants, in a small community largely inhabited by retirees. It's smack dab in the middle of summer, and the temperatures were well in the high 90s to the low 100s. My nightly routine would consist of walking my Australian Shepherd. However, I would wait until it was almost dark to avoid heat. I grabbed my phone, a small pocket knife, some headphones, my pup, and set out for my nightly walk. My community is also home to a significant amount of equestrian riders as well as cattle ranchers. The trails walked were designated horse riding trails, set between pastures. The night I had decided to take the horse trail that stretches for approximately 2 miles between back-to-back padlocks. It's basically a long, narrow trail that's between very large backyards. My ending destination was the Equestrian Center, a communal equestrian park where all types of horse riders could enjoy various activities on their horses. Making my way through the sandy terrain of the trail, it was nearly dark now. The sky was becoming a deeper shade of blue every time I looked up, and my dog was getting harder to see. I estimated my arrival at the Equestrian Center to be around 15 minutes from my current position, so I sent a text to my mother. I'll be at the Equestrian Center in about 15 minutes. Could you meet me there? I'm too tired to walk back. My mother replied, Sure, I'll leave in 10 minutes. Now at that point, I was just outside the east entrance of the Equestrian Center, where the Enchanted Forest Trail connects to the straight trail I was on, sort of like a 3-way intersection. You can either go left to the Enchanted Forest Trail, or you can go straight into the Equestrian Center. Before I reached the intersection of the trails, I noticed a shift in my dog's behavior as she becomes anxious and simply worried. She had her eyes fixated on the forest and stopped dead in her tracks. I played it off as another animal within the forest, like a bobcat or boar, as they weren't uncommon in my area. I gave her a slight tug on her collar, although she was still insistently focused on the forest. With a little more convincing, I was able to get her moving forward, pushing on towards the Equestrian Center where my mother would be waiting for our arrival. Now, it was nearly pitch black, with only the moon guiding me with its low light. There was just the slightest of visibility, forcing me to turn on my cell phone's dim flashlight. Entering the Equestrian Center now, I noticed something that startled me immensely. A very tall person, a man about 10 to 15 feet into the Enchanted Forest Trail, with his back towards me, standing completely still, his head facing the sky and his hands open, palms pointing in front of him, while his arms are at his sides. He was tall. I would say approximately 6 feet, slim build, short dark hair, was wearing what looked like to be a light blue scrubs, or at least a very thin blue napkin-like material. And he was barefoot. What startled me the most was his demeanor and what he was doing. His stance was enough to scare anyone in that setting, but as I approached him slowly, it appeared to me he was shaking, vibrating, or slightly convulsing, but doing nothing while standing up. It didn't seem like he had any control over it, although he remained his balance perfectly. Scared and not entirely sure what to do, I asked him, "Hello, excuse me?" I paused momentarily and raised my voice slightly with the next question. "Is everything all right?" When I said that, he stopped shaking altogether, but still doesn't turn around or move another muscle. He just remains that same creepy position and doesn't even move. For a brief moment, I had thought I might have been imagining this. I glanced down at my dog, and she was also concerned with the state and condition of this man and began growling quietly. To then, I knew it wasn't in my head. When I looked back up, he had moved closer to me, about 7 feet closer, now almost on my trail's path. I had only looked at my dog for a split second. He did without making a sound. He still wasn't facing me either, and his hands were still open, head still facing the sky. I wasn't about to wait and see what the guy was doing, or what his intentions were, so slowly eased my way past him towards the equestrian center as quietly as I could, before I felt that I was at a safe enough distance to start sprinting as fast as I could away from this guy. When I reached the first arena of the equestrian center, I looked back in the direction of the forest completely out of breath, and there he was. The fucker was standing on the edge of the trail outside of the forest, standing there, facing me. I was too far away to see his face, and frankly, I didn't want to. I couldn't make out any features. All I could see was his silhouette illuminated by the moonlight, peeking through the forest trail. I continued to run with no intention of stopping until I found someone. I had never been so happy to see my nagging neighbor, Penny, and her moody Mar, Jolene, riding in the Meliano area. She noticed my distress, but due to her already harsh opinions of me, I had told her I had been on an endurance run and was just very out of breath and tired. I wanted to avoid any small town gossip as much as I could. My mother arrived with impeccable timing. During the ride home, I broke down in a state of paranoia, distress, and panic at what I had just witnessed. My mother didn't know exactly what to make of it, so she recommended I file a police report with the local PD. About an hour after getting home, an officer shows up to take my statement. Following up the next day, the same officer claims to have went and checked out the area but didn't find anyone or anything out of the blue, apart from parcels of bare footprints. But there's nothing incriminating or suspicious about someone going for a walk without shoes. He played it off as a joke and accused me of being under the influence, but I can assure you, I was completely sober. Nothing ever came of this. I attended weekly sessions for almost 2 years following this event and never went on walks by myself ever again. I had night terrors about the man and still do. I still don't know what to make of it. I don't know if I ever will. My great-grandfather was a homeopathic doctor, and his work would have often required traveling to neighboring villages. Oftentimes, he'd run late. Now, villages in the 60s and 70s were not densely populated. Come dusk, they would be tucked in bed. On many occasions, he encountered shapeshifters he'd see a goat pop up in front of him and out of nowhere, and then when he'd pass it and turn around, there would be nothing. However, one encounter in particular stuck with him forever. He had to walk through some woods to get home and was running late again. It was around dusk after walking for a while. He heard some music. He then saw lights and little people, but they didn't look humanly. Some of them approached him and asked if he'd like to be part of their wedding. He refused, but they wouldn't take no for an answer. He realized they were in fact ghosts. He had to stick around for a while. He explained how it was just like a human wedding. Lights, music, bride all dressed up. They served food, and my great-grandfather asked again if he could leave. They finally let him go, but insisted they pack him the food. It was dal chow. When he got home, however, and opened the package, it was only dung on a leaf. So this happened to me in 2009. I was 22 at the time, but I am very short and often mistaken as a young teen. I had just had a driving lesson, and while normally my instructor would drop me off in my front of my home at the end of our lessons, that day he had somewhere to be straight after and dropped me off at a nearby bus stop. My apartment block was about 500 meters away, at the end of a long stretch of quiet road. It was an area that was being built up at the time, so there was a couple abandoned old houses to the left and right in my apartment block at the very end, and that's it. It was rare to see cars there that weren't just going straight to the apartment block, because there was just nothing there, except for a clinic a couple streets away. So you could occasionally get someone who was lost looking for directions. So it's around 8 p.m. and it just got dark outside. The street is barely lit, but it only takes a few minutes to get from the bus stop to my house, so I don't think anything of it until a car drives past me, but then starts backing up until it's driving slowly beside me. A woman is driving and a man is in the passenger seat. I sort of slow down thinking they're going to ask me for directions to the clinic. The woman asks, "Do you live here?" So now I'm thinking they definitely want directions. And I stopped and said, "Yes." But then she says, "We are the police and we are going to take you home." Mind you, this is a totally normal vehicle. 3 people aren't in uniform or look in any way official. I'm incredulous. I literally so stunned, all I can say is something like, "You're taking the piss?" Not an English-speaking country, by the way. Immediately, I'm thinking these people think I'm like 10, and they're trying to kidnap me. The woman is starting to get agitated and keeps repeating, "You have to respect police. Get in the car and we will take you home." I'm so shocked, I'm like, how dare you? Partly offended that someone would think people are stupid enough to fall for this. At this point, the car is stopped and I see the woman moving to open the door. So I burst in the fastest sprint of my life while fumbling with my phone to call my mom, screaming before I even got to the block. "Buzz me in, I'm in danger." My dad went out to look for them immediately after, but the car was nowhere in the area. He informed the police, but nothing ever came of it. I've always been super creeped out by this story and often find myself wondering what their intentions were. Just glad the story has found its home. This just happened probably 10 minutes ago, so I'm sorry if it seems jumbled. I just got off work about 20 minutes ago. Where I work, parking is extremely hard to find, so I unfortunately had to park way down the street from my work. I was pretty much at my car about to unlock it when a white and black Jeep, I think it was a Jeep, came down the road on the opposite side of the street I was on. There was a man in it, and he saw me and stopped right in the middle of the road on the opposite side of the street. and started talking to me. I looked at him, completely ignored him, and proceeded to get into my car. He started slowly driving down the road a bit. While he was doing that, I then turned on my car. I was looking in my mirrors, just checking to see what he would do. He flipped a U-turn, and by this point, I had my car turned on. He stopped in the middle of the road, right behind me, waiting for me to pull out of the parking spot. Of course I didn't, because I was scared he was going to follow me. I was so scared at this point and thought he was going to get out of his car, which luckily he didn't. We sat there for about 5 minutes, and I was so terrified to pull out because I thought he was going to follow me. He then just drove off extremely fast, and I immediately left the parking spot and drove around the streets, taking random turns and going the opposite way he did, just in case he still somehow saw my car. This is probably one of the most terrifying things that's ever happened to me. I had just texted my story to a coworker who was leaving the same time as me. She saw the Jeep and thought he was just looking for parking. This story happened around 4 years ago when I was 15 years old and we moved into this house. Sorry about grammar and stuff. I'm no good at it. Backstory. We live in a very small tourist town. School K through 12 in one building and a population of 700. Not during tourist season. Kinda small. There was this weird druggie that everyone knew and hated. He lived in one of his parents' houses and didn't pay rent, so they decided to kick him out. My parents were friends with the family and helped take care of his kids when he couldn't, so we were on pretty good terms. They gave the druggie, I'll call him just D for short, 30 days to move out for failing to pay a single rent check in his miserable life. We weren't doing very well at all financially and needed somewhere to stay or rent. We began talking to D's parents about the house, and they said we could begin renting to buy as soon as he moves out. The 30-day mark came around, and we asked D if he was ready, and he acted like he knew nothing about what we were talking about. His parents said they were just going to give him some extra days and help him move his stuff. So we waited about another month. At this point, the current place we were staying, we had to move out in a few days. We went to the house and went inside to see all of D's stuff still there. We decided we couldn't wait and just bagged his stuff up and told him to pick it up. Fast forward about a year. We always heard scurrying like mouse and stuff in the ceiling, but we have a ton of strange animals like mice, snakes, lizards, chinchillas, etc. One of our 4 snakes went missing from its closed tank with clips holding down the lid. There were no holes anywhere to be found. We didn't think anything of it, but it was a bit strange. Eventually we started hearing louder sounds, and our dad said it was just the house settling. Stuff was disappearing from the fridge, electrical bills went up, we smelt smoke, etc. Us kids got blamed for all of it, and got our phones and my PC taken away. But the power bill was still up, and I also got blamed for smoking in the house, which my parents had no reason to believe or prompt this accusation. So I was grounded until graduation. I was mad now, because I did not smoke in our house. I was unbelievably bored one day, not being able to do anything. So I decided to explore our attic. I opened the door. Holy shit. My mom then came right up the ladder ready to beat me, and saw it too. A bed, microwave, mini fridge, cigarettes, unsmoked blunts, etc. Guess who? It's the druggie. He then came back that night through my little sister's window. He was higher than I have ever seen a person and admitted to a bunch of stuff, and we recorded him. He took the snake and let it loose to get rid of the mice. He snuck in to my little sister's room every night, but none of this puts this in let's not meet, now does it? In court, he then admitted to making a small hole in the floor of the attic to watch my little 11-year-old sister sleep at night. We changed all locks, got a Ring doorbell, placed higher security locks on all the windows and more. And the worst part of all, this creep only got 6 months probation for marijuana possession, which wasn't yet legal in my state. He got only 1 year of prison for breaking and entering for an entire year almost every day. What kind of bullshit system is that? He did have to pay a pretty heavy fine for damages and to pay us back a year's worth of our electric bill. We are now out of debt and my parents are living steadily because he finally finished paying all the fines to us. My sister has to go to a therapist twice a week and might never get a good night's sleep again.